Today at 6, the fallout continues after that Downing Street video appearing to make fun of a party during lockdown.
Because she wants to
the
be
number
able
10 aide, seen laughing with colleagues on the video, was emotional today. She resigned a short while ago.
To all of you who lost loved ones, who endured intolerable loneliness, and who struggled with your businesses, I am truly sorry.
That video, dating from a year ago, has brought calls for Boris Johnson's resignation, but he still claims that the party didn't happen.
I apologise unreservedly for the offence that it has caused up and down the country, and I apologise for the impression that it gives.
Millions of people now think the Prime Minister was taking them for fools, and that they were lied to.
Now, we are expecting a news conference in Downing Street on extra COVID measures for England. We'll join that as and when it happens. Also tonight on this extended edition of BBC News at 6, Pfizer-BioNTech announced that 3 doses of their vaccine can neutralise the new Omicron variant of the virus. And a terrible start for England on the first day of the first Ashes test in Brisbane. Warm welcome to BBC News at 6, which comes today from the BBC headquarters in Salford in Greater Manchester. Now, Boris Johnson has faced more calls for his resignation today following the emergence of that video, which has caused shockwaves at Westminster and much further afield. The video showed his staff joking about a Christmas party last December during the strict lockdown, when many families were unable to visit their loved ones. Allegra Stratton, the aide seen laughing on the video, has resigned this afternoon. And Boris Johnson apologised for the video, but he then repeated his claim that no party had taken place. Labour Sir Keir Starmer said he was treating the country like fools. Well, in a moment, we are expecting the Prime Minister to give that news conference, so let's just stay with this for the moment before we recap on the day's events earlier. And let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, Vicky Young, who's at Westminster. Now, Vicky, this news conference has been rather hastily arranged, as we understand it. It's to start in the next few minutes. What are we expecting?
Well, I think we can expect the Prime Minister not to want to talk about parties in Downing Street, that's for sure. He wants to concentrate on COVID. Now, we've heard the message from him over the last few weeks, urging everybody to get their booster jabs. The big question now is he going to go further for England when it comes to COVID restrictions? Now, the Cabinet met this afternoon. They were discussing, amongst other things, what is known as Plan B. Now, Downing Street has been very reluctant to move to this. They've said they want to wait until they have more details, more scientific data about that new variant. But it appears this evening that they are going to act. Now, if they were to follow Plan B as it was set out previously by the Health Secretary, it would mean not only more masks being worn, it would also mean more COVID certification. Now, that means people having to prove their COVID status before entering venues such as nightclubs, for example. And in the plan as it was laid out, we don't yet know if that is what has been agreed, but actually it would mean that showing a negative test would not be enough. You would have to show that you were vaccinated. There also would be more calls for people to work from home if possible, bringing England in line with other parts of the United Kingdom. Now, I can tell you that talking to lots of Conservative MPs today, they are pretty angry about all of this. One of them even suggested that this would be a diversionary tactic, trying to deflect attention away from the embarrassment about a party that took place in Downing Street last year. So we'll have to see what the Prime Minister has to say about all of this and what evidence he is using to bring in any further changes. As I say, Downing Street has always said they needed more scientific evidence about the new variant. They would only act once they got that. The big question now is, have they got it? And also, what is the reaction going to be from Parliament if they are told that now is the time to bring in more restrictions?
Vicky, let's take a quick look inside Downing Street again to see what the state of readiness there is. And no appearance yet from the Prime Minister and the 2 experts who will be there with him to describe what measures they might indeed be unveiling. But Vicky, it could turn out to be a very, very significant statement with just a few weeks to go to Christmas.
That's right, and I think everybody watching this will be remembering last year. For a long time, Boris Johnson said that Christmas would be normal, that people would be able to gather, and then we all remember so clearly, don't we, what happened. A new variant emerged, it spread quickly, and it prompted him to bring in those restrictions which forced so many to spend Christmas apart from their loved ones. So I think the fear amongst lots of people is that are we about to see a repeat of that? Now, from everyone I've spoken to, it doesn't feel as if we're heading for those kind of draconian restrictions again, that there will be further steps, but not going that far. And certainly some of the opposition parties have been saying for some time that more needs to be done. The Prime Minister, of course, over this pandemic has been accused time and time again of acting too late, of waiting until it feels that the COVID cases are rising rapidly before taking action. He is obviously very, very reluctant to bring in further restrictions on people, but as ever, protecting the NHS has been what this government has been trying to do. They don't want the NHS to be overwhelmed. They do feel that vaccinations have made a huge difference. If you look at the number of cases compared to last year, yes, they are still pretty high across the UK, but the number of hospitalisations and deaths is nowhere near what it was. I think the big unknown with the new variant is whether the vaccinations will work. Let's have a listen.
Good afternoon, and thank you very much for joining us. As soon as we learned of the new Omicron variant, this government acted, introducing targeted and proportionate measures as a precaution, whilst our scientists discovered more, and we're learning more every day. We don't yet know Omicron's severity, its exact rate of transmission, nor indeed the full effectiveness of our vaccines against it. But since I last spoke to you, it's become increasingly clear that Omicron is growing much faster than the previous Delta variant, and it's spreading rapidly all around the world. 568 cases have been confirmed through genomic sequencing across every region of the UK, and the true number is certain to be much higher. Most worryingly, there is evidence that the doubling time of Omicron in the UK could currently be between 2 and 3 days. And while there are some limits on what we can learn from South Africa, because of the different rates of vaccination, different rates of previous infection, we're seeing growth in cases here in the UK that now mirrors the rapid increases previously seen in South Africa. And South Africa is also seeing hospitalizations roughly doubling in a week, meaning that we can't yet assume that Omicron is less severe than previous variants. So while the picture may get better, and I sincerely hope that it will, we know that the remorseless logic of exponential growth could lead to a big rise in hospitalizations and therefore, sadly, in deaths. And that's why it's now the proportionate and the responsible thing to move to Plan B in England, while continuing to work closely with our colleagues in the devolved administrations, so we slow the spread of the virus, buy ourselves the time to get yet more boosters into arms, and especially in the older and more vulnerable people, and understand the answers to the key outstanding questions about Omicron. So, first, we will reintroduce the guidance to work from home. Employers should use the rest of the week to discuss working arrangements with their employees, but from Monday, you should work from home if you can. Go to work if you must, but work from home if you can. And I know this will be hard for many people, but by reducing your contacts in the workplace, you will help slow transmission. Second, from this Friday, we will further extend the legal requirement to wear a face mask to most public indoor venues, including theatres and cinemas. There will be, of course, exceptions where it's not practical, such as when eating, drinking, exercising, or singing. Third, we'll also make the NHS COVID pass mandatory for entry into nightclubs and venues where large crowds gather, including unseated indoor venues with more than 500 people, unseated outdoor venues with more than 4,000 people, and any venue with more than 10,000 people. The NHS COVID pass can still be obtained with 2 doses, but we will keep this under review as the boosters roll out. And having taken clinical advice since the emergence of Omicron, a negative lateral flow test will also be sufficient. As we set out in Plan B, we will give businesses a week's notice, so this will come into force in a week's time, helping to keep these events and venues open at full capacity, while giving everyone who attends them confidence that those around them have done the responsible thing to minimise risk to others. As Omicron spreads in the community, we will also introduce daily tests for contacts instead of isolation, so we keep people safe while minimising the disruption to daily life. And of course, we will take every step to ensure our NHS is ready for the challenges ahead. But the single biggest thing that every one of us can do is to get our jabs, and crucially to get that booster as soon as our turn arrives. 1 year to the day since the UK became the first country in the world to administer a COVID vaccine into the arms of Margaret Keenan, we've opened up the vaccine booster to all those over 40, and we're reducing the gap between second dose and booster to a minimum of just 3 months. Our heroic NHS staff and volunteers have already done almost 21 million boosters, including reaching 84% of all the eligible over 80s. But we need to go further and faster still, because our scientists are absolutely confident that your immune response will be stronger if you've been boosted. And while you're at it, please get your flu jab too. Let's do everything we can to protect ourselves and our loved ones this winter and to reduce the pressures on our NHS. As we learn more, so we will be guided by the hard medical data around 4 key criteria: the efficacy of our vaccines and our boosters, the severity of Omicron, the speed of its spread, and the rate of hospitalizations. We will constantly monitor the data and keep it under review. And of course, we must be humble in the face of this virus. But if, and indeed as soon as, it becomes clear that the boosters are capable of holding this Omicron variant, and we've boosted enough people to do that job of keeping Omicron in equilibrium, then we will be able to move forward as before. So please, everybody, play your part and get boosted. I'm now going to hand over to Chris to do the slides.
Thank you, Prime Minister. First slide, please. I wanted to situate this initially on where we are with Delta, because what's happening is Omicron is coming on the back of a still high rate of Delta transmission and hospitalisation. So in the first slide, what we have is the number of people testing positive for COVID in the UK, and that has been drifting upwards, not at a very rapid rate, but it has been drifting upwards. The Omicron data aren't really going to be visible in this for a few days, but they will become visible over time. Next slide, please. The number of people in the hospital with COVID in the UK has, because of the booster vaccination programme in particular, been drifting down until this point in time, with the numbers going into hospital reducing, although that's now stabilised slightly. And that's really because the boosters are particularly going to protect and are protecting people who are in the highest risk categories, as the Prime Minister has said. Next slide, please. And the number of people in the UK who are dying has again gradually been decreasing over time, but is still a daily average of 121 deaths from COVID. So we still have a significant issue with COVID, and I think anybody who speaks to anyone working in the NHS would say that is on top of an incredibly busy system. Next slide, please. In terms of our major countermeasures, of course, the biggest one, as the Prime Minister has said, is boosting. And this is steadily increasing. So we now have over a third of those who are eligible have already had a booster, and they are, by and large, the most vulnerable third. But there's still people who are in higher risk groups who have not been boosted. And of course, we have to move down those groups. And that is going to become absolutely critical, we think, as we move on into a period when Omicron becomes significant and probably then becomes dominant. Next slide, please. And if this is just a data just to show quite how effective, with the variants we've had to date, vaccination can be. And what it compares is, in the dark lines, the hospitalisation rate in the blue-black bars in those who are unvaccinated, and in the orange bars, those who are vaccinated with 2 doses. This is largely protecting against Delta. But as you can see, at every age, a really substantial improvement in your protection. Next slide, please. So now we move on to the data on Omicron, and these are data probably people have seen versions of in media over the last few days, but I think they do need fleshing out a bit. So these are the number of people testing positive for COVID-19 in South Africa. At this point in time, the big increase in COVID in South Africa is virtually all the Omicron variant. And this is now spread all around South Africa. And as you can see, this is an incredibly steep increase in rates. And we're now seeing this translating into increases in hospitalisation. So, for example, I was talking to some of my colleagues from South Africa this afternoon, and they were saying that informal data still to be added to, but there was around about a 300% increase on hospitalisations over the last week. So some of those will have come in with Omicron, and some of them will come in as a result of Omicron. But the fact is those numbers are going up very sharply. Next slide, please. So what's happening here in the UK? Well, I'm afraid that the data here are now clear. What you can see here is the number on the left, and on the right the percentage of cases with what's called S gene target failure. This is a marker for Omicron. Virtually all the cases now who've got this marker will have Omicron. A very small number at the bottom will not. And as you can see, whether you look at the absolute count or the percentage, this is going up incredibly fast now. And as the Prime Minister has said, this is doubling at this point in time. It may slow down, and the aim of the measures announced by the Prime Minister is to slow things down, but it's doubling currently between 2 and 3, every 2 and 3 days. That is an extraordinarily fast rate, and you therefore can get, with very small numbers to very large numbers, really quite quickly. Now, the question obviously people reasonably want to ask is, will this feed through to people in hospital, and how quickly? And I think I'd just like to just point out 2 realities. First of all, the first one is a good one. At the moment, the spread is in younger people who you would not expect to go into hospital, and it's once it starts moving up the ages and into vulnerable groups that you'll start to see that. So there will be a lag as it moves into more vulnerable groups. And then we know from previous waves, and this is not particularly surprising, that there is a delay between people becoming infected with COVID and ending up with symptoms and then with hospitalisation. So there's usually about a 2-week delay. We would therefore not expect that these cases, that the case rates in hospital will start to go up for a number of probably 2 to 3 weeks. And in that period, if you're doubling up at the speed we're talking about now, we move from very small numbers to really substantial numbers, and it will keep on doubling. And that really is the reason why these measures have been announced by the Prime Minister as agreed by ministers today. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much, Chris. Patrick, anything you want to add? Okay, good. Well, let's go to members of the public then. Dave from Chester.
Are mandatory vaccinations being considered, like they are in the EU and other global nations? And if not, why? Why is it acceptable to put measures on our freedoms, but not that on our vaccination statuses?
Thanks, Dave. Well, I said right at the beginning of this pandemic that I think, or as soon as we were really talking about vaccination seriously, that I didn't want us to have a society and a culture where we force people to get vaccinated. I don't think that's ever been the way we do things in this country. And actually, Dave, we've been able to achieve through the voluntarism of the British people, through their incredible public spiritedness, willingness to roll up their sleeves and get vaccinated, huge numbers, huge proportions of our population. I think that there is going to come a point if we can show that the vaccines are capable of holding of Omicron, and that's the key thing that I think that we need to test. Well, I do think that we're going to have a conversation about ways in which we deal with this pandemic, because I want to be absolutely clear with you. I don't believe we can keep going indefinitely with non-pharmaceutical interventions. I mean restrictions on people's way of life. Where just because a substantial proportion of the population still, sadly, has not got vaccinated. And I think we're going to need to have a national conversation about the way forward and the other things that we can do to protect those who are hard to reach, who haven't got vaccinated for one reason or another, who may have medical reasons why they can't get vaccinated, other ways of protecting them. But that is a stage that I think we will come to if and when we establish, as I hope that we will, that the booster is effective against Omicron, and the booster is capable of holding Omicron, getting us back into that equilibrium that the double jabs got us into with Delta, if you follow me. So it's at that moment that I think we will have to talk seriously about moving on from the way from thinking about further NPIs and thinking about other ways in which we protect people. Rachel from Essex. Rachel asks, why can't fully vaccinated British travellers stuck in red-listed countries self-isolate at home when they return instead of a hotel? Quarantine hotels are too expensive, especially as this was implemented at short notice, not giving travellers a chance to get home. Well, Rachel, I think that's a very fair challenge. I think that given the way Omicron is now seeded around the world and not just in red-listed countries, I think we will be looking at the red list and the way that we do it. But it's been very important in the immediate period, the immediate response to Omicron, to have very tough border measures to slow the arrival of the variant in this country, and that was the objective of those measures, and continues to be the objective. I mean, Chris, Patrick, anything you want to add to that? Okay, then let's go straight to Laura Koonsberger, BBC News.
Thank you very much, Prime Minister. You're tightening the rules again for millions of people tonight. How can you stand at that lectern, exactly where some of your team laughed and joked about COVID rules, and tell people they must now follow your new instructions? And are you really asking the public to believe that you had no idea what was going on under your own roof?
Actually, the first thing I want to say, thanks very much, Laura. The first thing I want to say is that I know that today Allegra Stratton has resigned, and I wanted to pay tribute to her, because she has been, in spite of what everybody has seen, and again, I make no excuses for the frivolity with which the subject was handled in that rehearsal that people saw in that clip, and there could be no excuse for it. And it was I can totally understand how infuriating it was. But I want to say that Allegra has been a fine colleague, has achieved a great deal in her time in government, and was a particularly effective spokesman for COP26. She coined the coal, cars, cash, trees agenda, and helped really to marshal and to rally the world behind the agreement in COP26. And I really, Laura, if you forgive me, I wanted to say that, because I think it's been a sad day for her as well, as an infuriating event for many people around the country. And on that point, look, I just want to repeat that the fundamental point is that I think the British public, notwithstanding the point that you make, can see the vital importance of the medical information that we're giving, and they can see the need to take it to heart and to act upon it. And that point has been proved time and time again. And it's never been more conspicuous in the way that the public has responded to the vaccine rollout and the way that they've done the responsible thing. So I take my encouragement from the way the public have dealt with it themselves. Anushka Astana of ITV.
Prime Minister, you've only really agreed to an investigation into what happened on December the 18th last year because of the video that emerged from this room. And Allegra Stratton's resignation seems to further suggest that a party took place despite the denials. But we've also had serious allegations about parties on 3 other occasions. So I want to ask you why they aren't being investigated. Is it because you haven't been caught out in those cases, or is it because reports are true that you attended some of them? And to the rest of you here, can I ask how worried you are about whether this undermines public trust? Because the polling suggests that it does do, and Conservative MPs are openly saying that it's very hard now to mandate the public to act.
Thanks very much, Anushka. Well, I repeat what I said in the House and earlier today. The Cabinet Secretary will conduct an inquiry into into what took place on December the 18th. As for other events that other dates that you mentioned, as far as I'm aware, to the best of my knowledge, and we have followed the rules throughout, and that is what you would expect. Indeed, we followed the rules. As far as I'm aware, the rules were followed on December the 18th as well. And I just repeat that point. But it's clearly important that the Cabinet Secretary is able to get to the bottom of it. But in the meantime, on your sort of your global, your big point again, Anushka, which is really the same as Laura's, I think overwhelmingly the public see the importance of the messages that they are getting via this medium. It is imperfect. We do what we can to explain what we think is necessary. I know it's contentious. I know it's difficult, and I know that sometimes the messages are confusing. We do our absolute best to make it as clear as possible, and we do everything that we can to protect public health. That's what we're driven by. But Chris and Patrick, you were asked.
I mean, the measures work because people follow them, and that's been shown time and time again during this. So it's incredibly important everyone follows it. It's everybody. It was incredibly important throughout. It's going to be incredibly important going forward, and it only works if we all do it. And we're now facing a viral variant that's rapidly progressing. It's got a doubling time of between 2 and 3 days. And measures need to be taken to try and slow the spread of that variant, as well as, and I think this is important, us all boosting our own defences by getting a booster jab. So I think the rules are there, quite carefully thought through and given scientific evidence, and they're there because they're important and they're there for everybody to stick to.
Yeah, if I can just add to that, I mean, I think we all know that people get very angry, including colleagues and friends, and when they feel that it's unfair. And the Prime Minister said that in the House of Commons, and he said it today. That's quite different from people, I think, wanting to actually know what's going on and then make decisions. And I think those two need to be separated. And the point about what we're trying to do is trying to actually say, look, here are the reasons. This is moving very fast, doubling every 2 to 3 days. It is too early for us to be absolutely confident about hospitalisations, but I think you've seen how things have gone before. That's probably the way to bet. And then if we're pleasantly surprised, no one will be happier than I would be, and Patrick and the Prime Minister. We know that it looked as if he was going to be able to evade vaccination, and now clinically we know that it can in terms of infection. So we know that is an issue, therefore the boosters become significantly more important. And we know that we're going early now so as to try and be able to slow this down at an early stage of events. And I think if it's laid out to people in a way that is reasonable, irrespective of other things, people want to know the logic as to why they're doing it, and I hope we're trying to lay out the logic of trying to do that. That's not in any way to try and move away from the earlier point, but I just think those two should be kept separate in people's minds.
Well,
Thanks
the time
very
is
much.
29 minutes past 6 here on BBC One. Let me just explain to you what's going on. This news conference in Downing Street with the Prime Minister and two of his senior advisors. We're going to leave this news conference now on BBC One. You can keep following it on the BBC News channel. And of course, lots of you are waiting patiently for the news where you are in the regions of England and in Wales and Scotland and Northern Ireland. And I can tell you that that will come at 7 p.m. So apologies for the delay, but we had to be on that news conference there because of the rather important announcement that was made by the Prime Minister in relation to millions of people, of course, millions of lives across England. So let's just recap a little so that we underline what's going on. Vicky Young, our Deputy Political Editor at Westminster, we were chatting to earlier, and with me here in the studio in Salford is our Health Editor, Huw Pym. So before we go and ask Vicky about some of the political implications, Huw, why not remind viewers, especially those who maybe are just joining us, what the main changes are as Mr Johnson announced them?
Well, Huw, this is a move to the full Plan B for England, which had been flagged up by ministers a month or so ago. Of course, there was a partial move towards that a week or so ago, with a requirement for face coverings to be worn on public transport and in retail environments, and of course, tests for people coming into the UK. The new measures, just announced, will be an extension of the requirement of masks, face coverings to theatres and cinemas, a requirement to work from home if you can. The Prime Minister said if you need to go into work, so be it, but a stronger working at home piece of guidance, and that the COVID pass would be mandatory, otherwise known as a vaccine passport by some. That would be mandatory in nightclubs and larger venues, including some large venues outdoors, which would include some sporting events. He did also say that a negative lateral flow test would also suffice for that.
Did this go further than you expected, or was this kind of a signal, given the statistics we got from the experts there, that this was necessary?
Well, I think in the light of the advice that we heard there from Professor Chris Whitty, England's Chief Medical Advisor, it seemed as if this was as far as they were likely to go, given what they'd said before about Plan B. But I don't think anyone was necessarily expecting it as soon as today. But Professor Whitty's analysis of Omicron was that although case numbers were really still pretty low relative to Delta, they were rising in the UK extraordinarily fast, doubling within 2 or 3 days. And he strongly implied that without the introduction of some further restrictions, hospitalisations, it would take 2 or 3 weeks for that to happen, would also rise pretty rapidly as well. So in the light of that advice, this is what ministers in England have decided to do.
OK, Huw, many thanks for now. Huw Pym there. Let's go back to Westminster and talk to Vicky. Well, Vicky, there was a lot there, and not just the announcement of the measures, but of course there's a big political context to this too. What did you make of it?
Yeah, that's right. The Prime Minister, again, having to fend off questions about all those reports about the party that took place in Downing Street last year, of course, when those kind of social gatherings were not allowed. Now, the fear amongst lots of Conservative MPs is that it dents public trust. Now, you can see right now why that's so important. The Prime Minister has stood up, he's introduced new measures, new restrictions for England, and he wants the public to follow them. But there are many in the Conservative Party who think that the behaviour last year, and the Prime Minister's announced an investigation into that, will mean that some people do not follow the rules. Now, Downing Street insists that what they've announced today when it comes to these tighter restrictions is proportionate, but I can tell you that the Health Secretary is currently on his feet in the House of Commons announcing this to MPs, and it was greeted with moans and groans from Conservatives, senior Conservatives saying that this is coming too soon, that it's not necessary. Some have even accused the government of using this as a diversionary tactic to take away attention from what's been going on when it comes to parties, and they think that the government should be waiting for more scientific evidence. Now, on the other side of that, you can see why Boris Johnson might want to act, because in the past he's been accused of leaving it too late and waiting until the numbers in hospitals start to go up. Well, certainly the scientists standing next to him tonight would say that that would be too late.
Vicky, many thanks for now. Vicky Young with her thoughts there at Westminster after that announcement we heard in Downing Street over the past half hour. As Vicky was saying, the announcement coming after a rather difficult day for the Prime Minister, facing more calls for his resignation following the emergence of a video shown by ITV, which has caused shockwaves, really, at Westminster, much further afield. That video showing staff joking about a Christmas party last December. That was during the very strict lockdown, when many families, of course, were unable to visit their loved ones. Allegra Stratton, who was the aide seen laughing on the video, has since resigned. She tendered her resignation this afternoon. Boris Johnson, as we've heard again in that news conference, has apologised for the video, but repeated his claim that no party took place. Labour Sir Keir Starmer said that he was treating, that's to say Mr Johnson was treating the public like fools. Our political editor Laura Kuensberg has the latest, and there is some flash photography coming up.
Even when there's official silence, there can be a lot of noise. There's no real hiding behind blacked-out windows.
Should the Prime Minister come clean about the party?
Ministers hustling away from defending number 10.
Why would anyone trust the government when you don't follow your own rules?
After 7 days, the fiasco around Downing Street's festivities under his roof was really down to one man to explain.
Have you lied to the public, Prime Minister?
Would it be good enough after his staff were caught on camera joking about a party last Christmas that broke the COVID rules? You be the judge.
I understand and share the anger up and down the country at seeing number 10 staff seeming to make light of lockdown measures. And I can understand how infuriating it must be to think that the people who have been setting the rules have not been following the rules, Mr. Speaker, because I was also furious to see that clip. And Mr. Speaker, I apologise unreservedly. I've asked the Cabinet Secretary to establish all the facts and to report back as soon as possible.
The Prime Minister, the government, spent the week telling the British public there was no party. All guidance was followed completely. Millions of people now think the Prime Minister was taking them for fools and that they were lied to.
I've been repeatedly assured that no rules were broken.
Still unable to give the Commons or you the full story of what really happened. Even behind the mask, his cabinet colleagues wishing they were anywhere but there. Boris Johnson himself, his head down, in more ways than one.
Does the Prime Minister think he has the moral authority to lead and to ask the British people to stick to the rules?
Throughout this pandemic, the Leader of the Opposition in particular has done nothing but play politics to try to muddy the waters, to confuse the public.
The Prime Minister may think there has to be an investigation into what happened, but millions of us have seen what seems to be toe-curling confirmation that something went on.
What's the answer?
Aides joking about how they'd explain away a party that broke COVID rules.
This fictional party was a business meeting. And it was not socially distanced.
Allegra Stratton, who did most of the talking in the leaked footage, quitting this afternoon, last year's Christmas laughter, turning to tears.
Can you stop, please?
Denying the party won't have been her decision. She's paid with her job.
The British people have made immense sacrifices in the ongoing battle against COVID-19. I now fear that my comments in the leaked video of the 20th of December last year have become a distraction in that fight. My remarks seemed to make light of the rules that people were doing everything to obey. That was never my intention. I will regret those remarks for the rest of my days, and I offer my profound apologies to all of you at home. To all of you who lost loved ones, who endured intolerable loneliness, and who struggled with your businesses, I am truly sorry. And this afternoon I am offering my resignation to the Prime Minister. Thanks for your time.
Her exit isn't the end of this, though. There are claims of other parties in Downing Street last year, even in the Prime Minister's flat, when socialising was off limits for us all. That's denied, but this mess has even given the SNP the vigour to call for the Prime Minister to quit.
The Prime Minister has a duty, the only right and moral choice left to him. It is for his resignation. When can we expect it?
And a moment for MPs to raise the agony of constituents who lost loved ones.
She is devastated and appalled at recent revelations as to what has gone on in Downing Street.
It's something I'll never ever get over, honestly.
That was Jane Roche, who lost her father and sister too.
When I saw that video, it sickened me. I was disgusted by it, thinking, how can they laugh when so many people are going through so much heartache and pain? I find it very hard to swallow to take instruction from the government, especially after this. You know, it leaves me not trusting them. I feel that it's been lie after lie after lie, and this has been sort of the nail in the coffin, to be honest.
This is a miserable and dangerous moment for Downing Street. It's not just about whether a few dozen staff had drinks in there last year, but whether the truth has been told, whether you can put your faith in what government says from day to day, or guidance, or even demands from ministers for what you have to do. With the virus creeping back and tighter restrictions too, it's no time for authority to be draining away. Alarm's been increasing in Cabinet about COVID, called to a last-minute meeting today. But the timing of tonight's announcement has been a surprise to some.
We can't yet assume that Omicron is less severe than previous variants. So while the picture may get better, and I sincerely hope that it will, we know that the remorseless logic of exponential growth could lead to a big rise in hospitalisations and therefore, sadly, in deaths. And that's why it's now the proportionate and the responsible thing to move to Plan B in England.
How can you stand at that lectern exactly where some of your team laughed and joked about COVID rules and tell people they must now follow your new instructions? And are you really asking the public to believe that you had no idea what was going on under your own roof?
The British public, notwithstanding the point that you make, can see the vital importance of the medical information that we're giving. And they can see the need to take it to heart and to act upon it.
Boris Johnson may be pushing the button on Plan B to cope with the pandemic. But this Christmas, the Prime Minister and the Tories may need a Plan B for his leadership too. Laura Kunzberg, BBC News, Downing Street.
Laura there talking about some of the turbulent events of the day. And as we heard in that news conference in Downing Street a short while ago, the experts believe that this new variant of coronavirus called Omicron spreads far more rapidly than the Delta variant. Minutes of a meeting of the government scientific advisors held on Tuesday and seen by the BBC say that decision makers will need to look urgently at the new restrictions to limit transmission. And of course, we've heard now today that some of those restrictions are to be put in place. Our health editor Huw Pym reports from Preston.
Shoppers in Preston today thinking about Christmas, but with many questions over what the next few weeks will bring. There's much which isn't known about the new variant, but scientific experts and modellers have become increasingly certain that Omicron does pose a threat.
Case numbers of Omicron are doubling at least every 3 days, maybe even every 2 days at the moment. So it's accelerating very fast. And put that in context, it's the same, if not faster, than we saw with the original strain of the virus in March of last year. So it is a concern.
Minutes of a meeting of the Experts SAGE committee yesterday, seen by the BBC, say that with the speed of growth seen, decision makers will need to consider response measures urgently to reduce transmission if the aim is to reduce the likelihood of unsustainable pressure on the NHS. Referring to any possible new measures, the minutes say adherence is likely to be higher if messaging and policy have clear rationales and are consistent. COVID numbers in hospital are much lower than in January, but any increase will add to the intense strain being felt now on the front line.
The health and care system is already facing a winter emergency, and it's really very, very difficult to see how we could cope with that increase in COVID patients. So the government is right and the public is right to want to do everything it can to minimise the risk of this virus spreading more quickly.
A central part of the plan has been accelerating the booster vaccine programme.
Have you any coronavirus symptoms?
Maria has just become eligible and she booked up for her jab at this centre in Preston this morning.
It's not just about yourself, it's about everybody, isn't it? So
Yeah, really, really important. And I kind of can't understand why people don't have it. I think it's our duty to protect each other that we have it, yeah.
The time between second and booster doses for those aged 40 and over has been halved to 3 months in England from today. There's already a similar policy in Scotland. That means more staff will be required at this centre and others.
I am concerned about the staff and the levels of staff. It's not that we can't go out and recruit staff, it's finding those staff that are available to come and help support the programme. So, for example, we did have community pharmacy in over the weekend helping support and give some vaccinations.
More data and more evidence about the spread and impact of Omicron is still required, but there's a clear view that preventive measures, including the faster booster rollout, have to be taken. Huw Edwards, BBC News.
Time then to look at the latest coronavirus figures for the UK. They show there were 51,342 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period. On average, there were over 48,500 new cases reported per day in the last 7 days. Latest figures show there were over 7,000 people in hospital being treated yesterday for coronavirus. 161 deaths were recorded of people who died within 28 days of a positive COVID test. It means on average in the past week, 121 COVID-related deaths were recorded every day. And if we look at vaccinations, over 21 million people have now had a booster jab. And to stay on the whole area of vaccinations, Pfizer and BioNTech say that 3 doses of their COVID vaccine have been able to neutralise the new Omicron variant of coronavirus following initial tests. But they said 2 doses may not be sufficient to protect against infection from the new variant. As our medical editor Fergus Walsh reports, Pfizer and BioNTech are the first manufacturers to provide data on the efficacy of their vaccine against Omicron, and they say it does underline the importance of getting fully vaccinated.
Morning. How are you doing?
There are many remarkable stories of survival against the odds on COVID wards.
It's so amazing to see you.
This patient was admitted to University Hospital Coventry 6 weeks ago, pregnant and unvaccinated. She was put on a ventilator and her baby, now in special care, was delivered at 26 weeks.
I nearly died, and I wish I had that vaccine. I wish I knew how bad a pregnant woman can get by not being vaccinated and the risks of COVID. This COVID has ruined my life.
So you didn't see your daughter for a month?
No, I didn't see her because I was in a coma. And that's a parent's worst nightmare.
There are many who are admitted who wish they could turn back the clock and have had their COVID jab. 4 out of 5 patients on the COVID wards here are unvaccinated. And although it's much less busy than back in January, there's real concern about what the coming weeks may bring. A small laboratory study by Pfizer-BioNTech has suggested 3 doses of their COVID vaccine produce sufficient antibodies to neutralise the Omicron variant, with 2 doses likely to stop severe disease. It's not real-world evidence, but it underlines the vital nature of boosting immunity.
We're turbocharging the programme again. We have almost 3,000 centres open, more vaccine centres than we've ever had. We are recruiting 42,000 extra volunteers, and of course we freed up GPs so that they can spend more time vaccinating.
It's a year to the day since Margaret Keenan became the first person in the world to get the Pfizer vaccine outside of a trial, reunited with the nurse who gave her the jab. 92 next week, she urged those still unvaccinated to come forward.
Please do have the jab, because it'll save your life and the life of your friends and family and the NHS as well, of course.
You're a global icon now.
I am. People meet me in the street and they say, oh, you know, thank God for you, because I wasn't going to have this job. And it's lovely to hear that, you know.
Since then, more than 51 million people in the UK have been vaccinated. But the pandemic is still far from over. Fergus Walsh, BBC News, Coventry.
Let's talk a little more about the working from home, because the advice in England is to work from home again, if you can, from Monday. That's what was announced in Downing Street. It will, of course, have a major impact on businesses and employees. The guidance was lifted in mid-July, along with most of the COVID restrictions. There's currently no formal advice to work from home in Wales and Northern Ireland, though it is being encouraged there. But in Scotland, the government there already advises working from home wherever possible. Our business editor, Simon Jack, has been getting reaction from businesses and from workers.
We're all in need of a bit of Christmas cheer, but in Manchester this evening, the fizz felt a bit flat for some.
I think it's better for us to be in the workplace with our colleagues, supporting each other. Working from home is really isolating, so for me, it's just not an option.
While others felt better prepared this time round.
When we did the first lockdown and we had to work from home, we didn't know what we were up against, but I feel like we're in a better place now and we're better equipped to deal with it. So I feel like it's a bit of an overreaction, if I'm honest.
But are businesses prepared for another setback? In our big cities, commuters and office workers are the lifeblood for businesses like this family-owned cafe, who suffered last time workers were told to stay at home.
We already lost one shop because everyone was working from home, so we lost one shop. So if start again working from home, I don't know what we're gonna do. It's gonna be very sad.
For some customers, the office is more than just a place of work.
Mentally, it's awful. Like, you know, I'm in my early 30s, stuck in my bedroom in London. Like, you know, no family around. I have a housemate. Like, you're just getting up, going 2 meters to a desk, working, and then you're stuck in your house. Like, what's the point? Like.
The UK economy is primarily a service-based economy. Sandwich places like this, over the road a pub, we've got a convenience store here, shoe repairs there, and all these businesses rely on people coming to work. And things were going back to normal. Estimates that are that 60% of office workers are spending at least some of the week in the office, and footfall on streets like this was 70% of pre-pandemic levels, which is why this news has been described by business organisations here in London as a crushing blow. And it could also lead to some unexpected and unpleasant consequences for the cost of living.
If we are not able to go out and take full advantage of the reopening of the economy, then we're staying at home. We're not buying services, we're not going out, we're buying goods instead. That increases demand for physical goods, and that potentially could add to already quite acute inflationary pressures.
Rising prices at the same time as slower economic activity is the worst of both worlds, and certainly not the Christmas boost that many businesses were hoping for. Simon Jack, BBC News.
Time to have a quick look at some of the day's other news then. Angela Merkel's 16 years as Chancellor of Germany has come to an end with the swearing in of the Social Democrat leader Olaf Scholz. His three-party coalition has a substantial majority in the German parliament. He's promised to make tackling climate change a priority. Mr. Scholz is just the fourth Chancellor of Germany in nearly 40 years. The Mercedes Formula One team has ended its controversial sponsorship deal with Kingspan, the firm that made some of the insulation used on Grenfell Tower. Kingspan's logo appeared on Mercedes cars at last weekend's Saudi Arabian Grand Prix, angering relatives and survivors of the fire, which destroyed the tower and claimed 72 lives. Kingspan maintains its insulation was on less than 5% of the building, but concerns were raised about its safety during the public inquiry into the tragedy. Well, on the first day of the Ashes test in Brisbane, England were bowled out for 147 by a dominant Australian side. First 3 wickets came in rapid succession, including one off the very first ball of the series. Well, let's have more then on the continuing fallout from that Downing Street video and the reaction to it. So with an apology from the Prime Minister, how is all this being viewed beyond the confines of Westminster and places like Salford in the north and beyond across the UK? Well, in North Shropshire, people there will get the chance to voice an opinion next week in a parliamentary by-election. The vacancy was caused by the resignation of the Conservative MP Owen Paterson, who was found to have breached parliamentary rules on lobbying. Our political correspondent Alex Forsyth has spent the day there.
The livestock sale in Market Drayton might feel a far cry from Westminster, but the political noise does resonate among the pens, the talk of a Downing Street party, and whether here it could come with a price. Former farmer Dennis and local minister Mark differ on how much it will matter.
If lies have been told, that affects people's decisions. We want to vote for people whose words mean something.
12 months ago doesn't count anymore. It's what's happening today what counts.
Do you think that will affect how you vote here in the by-election?
This rural seat has been solid Conservative for decades, but the party is facing a fight from Labour and the Lib Dems, who are pushing hard, with a host of other parties standing too. This contest is a crucial measure of the national mood. The result will have ramifications that stretch beyond Shropshire. For mums Cathy and Claire, though, it is local issues that really count.
Services provided for families and children, and there's been such big cuts in this area recently, in recent years.
We're not really connected, we're kind of a bit in the middle of nowhere in Shropshire when it comes to public transport.
While public services matter most to them, they are frustrated at the idea of a party having happened, particularly with the prospect of new COVID restrictions coming down the track.
It makes me think if they're so blasé about the rules, why should we be that concerned about the rules? So
it feels like a betrayal, really, if that has happened.
COVID is still on people's minds here. At this cafe in Market Drayton, manager Louise is open to more regulations for the sake of safety, but is angered by the idea that others haven't stuck to the rules.
I'm wondering why it's taken so long for them to announce that they had a party or cheese and biscuits and a gathering.
Would that affect how you might vote in this by-election in North Shropshire?
No, I don't think it would. I think I will stick to who I think will do the best job for Shropshire.
There is a lot riding on this increasingly heated race, which hasn't escaped those at this festive wreath-making.
What are the issues on your mind?
Probably education, the health service as well, yeah, and basic morals of the person who's actually going to be our Parliament, stand in Parliament for us as well.
I have been a Conservative voter all my life and I will not be voting Conservative.
What's the reason?
Parties in Downing Street and downright lies.
I don't think it does them any favours. I think we've just got to wait and see. I am sick to death of people going on about the party, though.
It's when the polls open next week that we'll know whether the ghosts of Christmases past have affected the political present. Alex Forsyth, BBC News, North Shropshire.
And you can find a full list of all the candidates standing in the North Shropshire by-election, which is on Thursday, December the 16th. It's on the BBC website, bbc.co.uk/news. It'll take you to that section. You can see the candidates there. So a rather eventful few hours at Westminster, but with ramifications for tens of millions of people right across England, and of course keeping an eye on the changes happening in Scotland, Wales and in Northern Ireland. So let's go back to Westminster and talk to Laura Kuensberg, our political editor. We've had the reaction to the video, we've had a resignation, we've had a news conference. Laura, what do we make of it all?
Well, Huw, I think the one clear finding tonight is this row is far from over, partly because the Prime Minister has got two very tricky problems that are absolutely knotted together. Firstly, the question of public and political faith in what happens in Downing Street that has been so shaken by what happened behind that closed door about 12 months ago. And second of all, the problem, the challenge of trying to get millions of people around the country again to take significant precautions about their own behaviour when it comes to really trying to bear down on this new COVID variant, which clearly, from listening to the scientists in there, is spreading at lightning speed around the country. And the real difficulty for Boris Johnson is that public faith, which has been taken a juddering from the problem here, has a direct impact on how effectively the problem with the pandemic can be solved. Separating that out is something that Downing Street is going to have to do. And a Conservative MP has just asked in the House of Commons, why should the public do things that number 10 people were not prepared to do? Boris Johnson is going to have to come up with really convincing answers to that quandary.
Laura, many thanks again for your analysis there in Downing Street. Laura Kuensberg, our political editor. We're going to take a look at the weather here in Salford. I have to say, Chris, temperature's dropped a bit, but you tell us what the rest is doing.
Yes, that's right, Huw. Chilly night to come. But it's Storm Barrow that's been taking centre stage.
Large and battering waves hurling rocks out onto the coastal promenade here in West Wales. Another reason to stay away from the coast when the weather gets stormy. At the moment, Barra continues to bring some strong gusts of wind. Gusts are running at 64 miles an hour around western Wales. And we've got these two shower streams running in across Northern Ireland, into the northwest of England and across Wales too. Mostly cold rain, but I think we're starting to see a little bit of snow up over the high ground in Wales. That's most likely in the Brecon Beacons. Might be something you come across over the next hour or two. Further north, a cold night with temperatures continuing to drop away. Northern England and Scotland will see a frost. Lowest temperatures about -2, -3 degrees. So a cold start to the day tomorrow for many. There'll be some of you that have a nice sunrise. And then as we go into the afternoon, we'll start to see this band of rain moving in off the Atlantic, moving across Northern Ireland into western Scotland, across western England and Wales too. That will eventually bring some milder air into the southwest, with temperatures finishing the day at 11. Otherwise, it's chilly for most of us, 6 or 7, similar to the temperatures we had today. On into Friday's forecast, we're back into those chilly northwesterly winds. Now, for many of us, there will be some decent spells of sunshine, sparkling blue skies at times. However, there will be lots of showers, particularly across the north and west, and sometimes those showers will work well inland towards parts of the Midlands too. Our temperatures still on the chilly side, 6 or 7, but it turns much milder into the weekend. Temperatures by Sunday, 10 to 13 degrees, Huw.
OK, Chris, we'll look forward to that. Thank you very much. Chris Fawkes there with the weather for us. That's all from this extended edition of BBC News at 6, where the Prime Minister, just within the last hour, announced the Plan B for England, with added COVID measures to come. We'll say goodbye for now on BBC One. We'll be back, of course, later on at 10 o'clock. But now, with this great view of Media City in Salford in Greater Manchester, it's time to join the BBC's news teams where you are. Bye for now.